So this presentation is simply just to go over some tips, requirements, recommendations for you when you design your research platform presentation for when it's presented at the research colloquium. So the research colloquium has our professional presentations, and the purpose is to communicate information about your research study and of course to inform other people. It's professional, not only the whole atmosphere, but it's professional relating to the technical components of your presentation, as well as how scholarly it is in nature. So your presentation content, there should be a title slide that starts out your presentation, which should have the title of your study as well as your research names. And so as you're going through your actual presentation, you will introduce your study, you will introduce each of the presenters where they will either step forward or, raise their hand or nod their head in some way, shape, or form. Each slide should highlight key points from each of the chapters or sections of your research study. So there should be a background and need. There should be a research purpose or questions. There should be research results or methodology, results, discussion, implications to practice. Each slide are generally displayed for about 20 to 30 seconds, and you could have up to 15 to 20 slides on average for a 10-minute presentation. However, we recommend, if you stay closer to 12 to 15 slides, somewhere around there. Your slide designs should use a bright, preferably a lighter colored background that is solid. Typically, it's easier to read if you have a darker background, or a lighter background with darker letters. Using some type of sans serif fonts or something very simple. Arial's a good choice. My favorite is Times New Roman. Those fonts that don't have extra elements with the tails or lines or the scripts or those kinds of things. Resist the temptation to reduce the font size to fit the screen. And so as a faculty, they tell us try to go for a 20-point font. Ideally, it's about 24 or larger, but certainly do not go any less than 18 or people in the back of the room will not be able to see your slides or what's on your slides. Maintain your consistency from the same font throughout your professional presentation. Use upper and lowercase letters, and so you may not want to use like periods and full sentences and commas and those kinds of things, but still use upper and lowercase letters. Make sure that you prevent screen fall off so that things aren't trailing off your slides. You'll want to test your first few slides as well to make sure everything fits on them. So I recommend printing them out. Use large, solid, dark colored bullets. So I know sometimes some of the options are arrows or, really exciting little fleur-de-lises, those kinds of things. Just be very, very simple. If you are using graphics on your slide, don't use any more than one graphic per slide. It's helpful to have some text between your graphic slides also. So if you're doing like tables and figures and those kinds of things. And do not use slide animations or any transition features as well. They sometimes get awkward and stuck and those kinds of things. So keep it very, very simple. When you're speaking and you're sharing your presentation, you'll want to organize your material in a way that's comfortable for you by using some type of a script. Okay, so we in the OT program typically have students write out word for word what they're going to say. And then perhaps put that in the notes section of your PowerPoint or an outline. We've even had students that write their notes on a 3x5 index card, those kinds of things. When you're talking, it's okay to look at your notes or your laptop monitor that's in front of you that may have your notes on there, but don't turn and look at the screen. You'll actually be turning your back to your audience, and so you want to avoid that. We will ask you to rehearse, rehearse individually, rehearse in front of a mirror, rehearse as a group, rehearse in front of your preceptor, rehearse in front of peers, and have your peers ask you questions. The more you work out your presentation ahead of time, the more likely you will be to work out the bugs prior to your presentation. And when I say bugs, I mean just little hiccups that can happen, just things that perhaps you don't know if you should put down your PowerPoint clicker and you don't know if the person's going to reach for it, or you don't know if you're going to go in front of or behind your other speaker when they're introducing you. And so just being sure that you're running through all of those things will help you iron out how professional your presentation looks before you give it. Just before you present, you will likely be nervous. It's okay to be nervous. We can expect that you will be nervous, and that's okay. When I'm nervous, I tend to have to focus on what I'm going to be doing, why I'm nervous in the first place. That anxiety gives me motivation to practice and rehearse. The more I do that, the less nervous or anxious I become. Before you present, you might be in a room and there may be multiple presenters that present before you do. And so as you're sitting there, be visualizing to yourself that you're going to do well in your presentation. Do some deep breathing, okay? Do some relaxation, those kinds of things right before you go to present. As you're presenting, it's okay to use natural gestures, to have voice inflection that really helps us add some interest. And imagine talking to your audience using eye contact. Okay, so don't be looking down and don't be reading your speech or your presentation word for word. We ask you to write it out word for word eventually, right? But then as you're practicing, you're gaining more confidence. You're burning that presentation into your mind, and that is when you can actually add your voice inflection and more of a conversant tone and more natural tone versus kind of that robotic monotone I'm reading from a script type of a presentation, because that we don't want to do. Some of the technicalities, so for dressing for the colloquium, it is professional formal. So it's not uncommon for men to wear suits and ties. It's not uncommon for the women to wear formal suits as well. I'm really not good to describe professional formal dress beyond that. I think of maybe having something that you would wear to a really important job interview, something along those lines. In the past, we've had students who have all wanted to wear a matching undershirt, right? And so they all had the same color shirt. That is not required, okay? Just simply professional dress or professional formal dress, that sort of thing. Now, I've never worn high heel shoes. I hear they're rather uncomfortable, and remember, for your poster presentation, you will be standing for quite a while. During your presentation, you will be standing for quite a while. You will be walking from room to room. And so just be cautious for wearing those high shoes. Make sure you're wearing good, comfortable, professional, formal shoes. and not the really sharp stilettos that may cause back pain, toe pain, foot pain, all of that kind of stuff. In addition to technical and scholarly skills, you're expected to model the Benedictine values by being dependable, responsible, having ethical behavior, being really professional when you're listening in on other students' presentations. When the crowd addresses you, being sure that you're meeting them with hospitality, respect. During your poster presentation, you're inviting people in, you're asking them to be a part of it, you're wanting to show and wanting to tell them and inform them about your research project. And so keeping in mind what those Benedictine values are. During your poster or during your platform presentation, there will be a computer in your assigned session room. Your presentation will be loaded onto the computer several days in advance, and your presentations, you will be submitting those either to myself or directly to whomever at the university is collecting those PowerPoints. I'll be in contact with you about that. And so you will have them in a PowerPoint format, and you will be sending them off to whoever that person is so they can get them uploaded to the computer, which will be in your assigned room. Now, we highly recommend that somebody from your group also saves your presentation on a flash drive, because there has been a time or two where students have gotten to the computer and for some reason there was an error or something didn't happen. It was lost in translation, something, and their presentation was not there. So it's always a good idea to have it saved on a flash drive just in case it's needed. How they do the presentations now is you are assigned a room and there are many presentations going on at the same time. And so there's no in and out of the rooms. You are there during a session, and you may have to listen to other disciplines give their research project. And so everybody there will get 10 minutes for your presentation. It must be at least 8 minutes long, okay? After 10 minutes, you are cut off. So at that 8-minute mark, somebody in the back of the room will likely hold up a 2-minute sign that whoever is speaking will be able to see then that they have 2 minutes remaining. They'll hold up another sign when there is 1 minute remaining. And then when it is time to stop and that 10 minutes is up, they will hold up a stop sign, and whoever is still talking has to be quiet and can no longer finish. So this again becomes very important when you are presenting and you are practicing and rehearsing and practicing and rehearsing, because typically when we go in front of an audience, we tend to go a little bit faster. And so again, the more we rehearse, the more likely it will be that our nerves will be calm, we'll stay at that same pace. When you rehearse, you'll kind of problem solve and see, okay, who's naturally going to be talking when that 2-minute mark goes up? Can they speed anything up? You'll be able to problem solve that out a little bit longer if you actually rehearse and do a good job rehearsing. When you're rehearsing, be sure that you are timing yourself as well. There are 5 minutes to entertain questions. Our dean of our School of Health Sciences is adamant that every single session there are questions. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that, but you can kind of expect that you will have questions posed during your or after your presentation. It's always a good idea when you're rehearsing to have another group of students come in and be that fresh set of ears and eyes that can ask or have you answer some questions that they come up with. It's sometimes nerve-wracking to be called on the spot, but I think students end up realizing they know so much more about their research since they lived and breathed it for so long, that they usually feel comfortable, or they're surprised at how comfortable they are answering those questions. But again, it can be nerve-wracking when you're called on the spot like that, and it helps if we're just a little prepared on how that feels. Here's an example of a slide. The purpose of the slides in an oral presentation is just simply to clarify content. So words of the text should represent the main points. Okay, so when you're actually talking, that is when you are actually clarifying the content that's on your slide. And so this particular slide you can see is very wordy. It's cluttered. It's not well spaced. And so we don't want the slides to represent what we're going to be stating necessarily to our audience. Again, this slide is boring, tedious, difficult to read, and so it's distracting. And so if you have a lot of words on your slide, people are going to try and hurry up and read the words on your slide and not listen to what you have to say. So more of the effective slides simply have a couple words on them, and you can speak to those points of clarifying contents. And so when I have the couple words clarify contents, I am actually speaking more than just those terms and clarifying what it is that I'm trying to say. Our next bullet point, highlight important information. So your effective slide is simply just having highlights, something that should just highlight some of the areas from your research. Your slide should also focus attention on your audience. And so again, the more words we have on our slide, the more likely our audience is going to be busy trying to read what those words are, and less likely to be focused on what it is that you're actually saying. So frequently asked questions, when do you have citations on your slide? I get this question asked a lot, like how do you know when you should cite something on your slide versus how do you know when you actually say the author's name in your presentation? Okay, so typically, if you want to give credit to the author and it flows well, I just recommend mentioning the author's name. If you mention it verbally, it does not have to be on the slide. However, at the end of your presentation, you should have a reference page. And so if you mention the author's name, that full reference should also go on your reference page. Now, if there's a main idea you're trying to refer to, and in my experience, this happens during more so of the document or of the discussion, where I may be highlighting some implications to practice or some points that I really want to discuss. And I may say a comment like, now this is similar to what we found in the literature, such as, and then I would list what we found in the literature. Okay, now at the end of that slide or at the end of that bullet or statement, depending on how I have it formatted, I may simply just have a smaller in-text citation right on the slide or right after that bullet point. Okay, and so that would be for when I'm not verbally stating the author's name. And again, if it is on the slide, you'll also want to include that on your last reference slide as well. We get asked a lot of questions. Oh my gosh, what are some examples of questions that the crowd asks? And so these are not all inclusive, but they're ones that I remember asking myself. There's some that I remember lots of people from the crowd asking, having to do about what you would do differently if you were to do the study again. Okay, so that's a good question to kind of think about. How will the results of your study impact your future practice? So a lot of the questions faculty are asking are, okay, so you did this research project, what did you learn from it? Okay, how is it going to impact you in your future? Based on your results, what would you recommend to other people? Or what would you recommend to other students? Okay, so I've heard that question quite often. And then another common question is, what surprised you most about your results? Okay, so um, again, not all inclusive, but just some really good open-ended questions, I think, that are broad enough that maybe they'll help you kind of problem solve and get some kind of a script. So if something like this is thrown out to you, you can kind of have an idea on how to um, field that question. I have a bunch of platform presentations for you to look at for examples. I think every preceptor does things a little bit different based on what we prefer, based on our experiences. So I do have a variety of them, not for you to look at the content per se, but just to look at how it looks. How is it formatted? How many words do they have on the slide? What do their in-text citations look like? What do their charts look like, or tables or figures? Those kinds of things. Okay, and so be sure you're looking at those examples. I think they'll help you get an idea together. All right, and if you have any questions, need any suggestions, I'm sure your research preceptors are there to help, and I am there to help as well. Thank you.